Welcome to the Boosted Volunteer Podcast. We share the stories of dedicated Booster Club volunteers and the tools and strategies they use to run successful booster clubs. We also have sought-out experts on fundraising, volunteer management, and running nonprofits to share best practices. Hosted by Robin Eisler and Evan Eisler, you won't want to miss these great episodes that will help you run your booster club like a champ.
Hi, it's Robin Eisler. Welcome to the Boosted Volunteer. I'm really excited today to be hosting Jake von Scherrer on our podcast. Jake has spent over 40 years in the school athletic space as an educator, coach, and athletic director. He's the author of the Athletic Director's Toolbox series, former president of the Florida Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association, and he has his own podcast with more than 700 interviews heard in all 50 states and 100 countries around the world. We're going to be talking with Jake today about the critical partnership between booster clubs and athletic directors, the pressures that are currently facing our athletic directors, and why a strong, organized booster club is vital to the success of high school programs. Well, welcome, Jake, to the Boosted Volunteer. I'm really excited to have you here today and share really the athletic director's perspective on the relationship between athletic directors and the athletic programs in the booster clubs. So welcome.
Oh, well, excited to be on. Appreciate all that you do in our space and all the services and resources you provide for my group, the ADs, and very happy to share.
Well, you've spent 41 years in education and athletics. You've hosted over 600 athletic directors on your podcast, and even written a book, Athletic Director's Toolbox series. So you've really seen it all from every aspect of the school sports environment and athletics. What's the biggest challenge that faces the athletic directors today?
Well, I mean, there's a number, but I would certainly say in the top three is something you're familiar with, and that's funding. And that could be funding in a financial way. It could also be funding in a time and a resources, human resources way too. Athletic directors at big schools, small schools, every school, if they say, oh yeah, everything's great, they're lying because they're struggling with what every aide is struggling with, and that's budget, money, and resources.
And it seems like if they finally get you some money, then they cut people, right? They cut people and you lose people off your staff, right?
Well, again, staffing is right up there. Hiring coaches and then retaining coaches is certainly a challenge. Part of that challenge is the funding of coach positions. We've got a situation going on here in Florida right now. It's a good situation. The Florida Coaches Coalition, it's the largest group of coaches in Florida. Their single purpose, and they've made tremendous headway, is to increase the amount of money that we're able to compensate our coaches with, not just the big marquee sports, but all the sports as well. There's actually a bill moving through our state legislature as we speak. So money is great. We always say we're never going to turn down money, but you got to use it in the right ways too.
Yeah. And the ADs really take the brunt of that, the funding and the structure of the organization, right? They're the ones managing that piece of it for the schools and the school districts and hiring the coaches and all of that.
Again, I've been in Florida since 2000, so I'm most familiar with how things operate here. At the public school system, most high schools, they have an athletic director who is in charge of all things athletic, including money, but most schools also have what they call an athletic business manager that handles, I guess, the accounts receivable and payable and all that stuff. So those two individuals would work closely together. Smaller schools, it's probably just that athletic director.
Got it. So it definitely depends on the structure of the school. What are some of the things that the ADs are juggling behind the scenes that a lot of people don't see, particularly in, our audience is mostly booster club leaders or volunteers. And what are some of the pressures the AD has going on that the booster club may or may not be aware of?
Well, I think many of the booster club volunteers who, let's face it, vast majority are going to be parents, people from the community that maybe their kids have graduated, but they still feel that love for the school and the program. They are probably more aware than, let's say, parents and supporters who are not involved in the booster club. I think that particular group, they show up at take your pick, swim meet, a basketball game, a football game. They show up and it magically happened. There's teams warming up, the popcorn's popping in the concession stand, the officials are there, the sideline crew or the courtside crew is ready. It's all just this magical event that people think it just happens. And that's what athletic directors are doing. They're working well in advance of game day, weeks and weeks in advance, to make sure that it all appears magical and seamless. And there's obviously a lot of work behind it. And athletic directors aren't complaining about that. They embrace it. They acknowledge it. They love their job. Hey, we get to go to games. That's our job. But there's a lot that goes into making sure that game comes off smoothly, because when something's wrong, when the concession stand's not open, well, gosh, we're supposed to have volunteers, or there's a mess in a bathroom and it's an exciting overtime game, or something has gone wrong, guess who they're going to? They're not calling the principal, they're calling the athletic director, as they should. So there's a lot of things going on.
What I find a lot of times when we talk to booster club leaders and then also coaches is there's two entirely different legally organizations working side by side, and they have different leadership, but yet they have to work in unison together. So it's a really almost like a symbiotic relationship between the two pieces. But independently, they have different leadership, little bit different goals sometimes. How can the athletic director make sure those things are aligned and everything's pointed in the right direction?
Well, you mentioned legalities. Some states, some school districts have very specific policies, if you will, some statutes regarding, let's say, separation of boosters in schools and that sort of thing. Other states, other school districts, it's left up to the individuals. But I think you make it work by having just 100% transparent and open communication between both groups. And here's an example. I took over as the athletic director. I was also hired as the head football coach at a private school here in South Florida when we first came here in 2000. And prior to my arrival, it was a young school. It's fair to say it was even still in its startup phase as a high school, middle school, high school. There were a couple of teams, individual teams, that had their own booster club. Most did not. And so to make a long story short, I spoke with my board and my head of school, my principal, if you will, talked to several parents from different sports. And to make a long story short, we announced we are having a school and athletic department booster club. There will be no more individual team booster organizations. It's all for one. And when we had our first meeting, let's say there's a lot of enthusiasm. Some were in favor of it, some were not. But out of that meeting, we came up with a goal, kind of a platform, if you will. This is what the Booster Club is going to do. This is how they're going to do it. And we moved forward and stayed true to that mission, if you will, for the 8 years that I was at that school. I ended up accepting another AD position at another school. But having that communication and having everyone involved, everybody had a chance to contribute their ideas. I think that's the key. You've got to have communication. When people get in their silos and those people over there, oh, no, it's those people over there, you're no longer a team. And if we're here for the kids, if we're here for the programs, we all got to be on the same page.
I think that's a good point. I'm based in Texas, and Texas is a little bit different, but we generally lean towards the sport-specific booster clubs in this particular area. And when I became president of the booster club, first thing I said is, well, I'm going to have a meeting with the coach. And the previous booster said, oh, no, we don't bother the coach. We don't talk to her. And I thought, how can I run a booster club that supports her program without sitting down with her and knowing what she needs and what she wants it to look like and, how all the pieces need to come together. But I think a lot of times the boosters on the booster side, on the volunteer side, can tend to be intimidated or a little bit afraid almost to reach out to administration or coaches. And I encourage our volunteers to do so, not overstep their bound, but you should be communicating. There should be a plan. And if you don't know what it is, you need to sit down and have a meeting.
Absolutely. And that just goes back to this whole idea of communication. And I'm not anti-individual sport booster organizations. We just felt we were a smaller school. There were about 250 students in the high school. So it was a smaller high school. And we had two booster clubs, two teams, if you will, from a booster perspective that were thriving. They were doing great. I exaggerate a little bit. The rest of our teams looked like the Little Sisters of the Poor as far as uniforms and swag. And we just said, hey, they all have the same school name, the same mascot on their jerseys. We are going to take care of these kids. And there were things that we could do as a school with, let's say, school budget money. And there were things that we couldn't take care of. And that's where we wanted the boosters to impact all of our programs. And let's face it, there's things that we need. Teams need uniforms. They need a home and an away uniform usually. They want to have a whiteout uniform. They want a blackout uniform. They want a camo uniform. They don't need those. They want them. And wanting's not a bad thing. So what we tried to do was come up with a system, and I kind of followed this at the other schools. I was at 3 different private schools here in Florida. They were all great schools. They all did well. They're all still doing well, even without me. But we wanted as a school, we're going to provide the things that our teams need. You need something, we're going to get it for you. Now, tell me what your wants are. And that's where communicating with the coach comes in. The coach knows what the kids want, what the teams want. The parents don't always know that. There's things that parents might want for their kid because they saw it on another team, and that's not a bad thing. But coaches, tell us what you want. And from a school perspective, we're going to try to get most of those things as long as they're reasonable. And then there's things that, hey, what's a pie in the sky sort of thing that you'd really like? And I'd throw out something big, like a new scoreboard or baseball. You got in softball, they have to have those jugs, pitching machines. Those are big ticket items. Those are things maybe that our boosters can help out with. But we want to know from the coach, okay? It's not the AD pushing this agenda. I'm going to the swim coach. I'm going to the tennis coach. I'm going to the wrestling coach. What do you need? What do you want? And what's something big that we could get you? And then we would communicate, or we wouldn't try, we'd share that with our boosters and say, hey, these are things that our coaches are saying that would really help out the program. I had a dad once, I know I'm getting ahead of myself, great dad, very supportive, wanted to buy the softball team, which his daughter played for, warm-up jackets. And we're in Florida. We don't need warm-up jackets. But the travel team had warm-up jackets. They probably had 3 of them. And so what they needed, though, was they were on a cycle where their uniforms really were, we needed to replace them. And so in conversations with the coach and the dad, and this dad could stroke a check for big money, we allowed him to buy the jackets, but he also bought those new uniforms too. And so we took care of a need, and we checked off one of those pie in the sky things that I probably wouldn't have authorized out of athletic monies, but it was a conversation with the parent.
Yeah. What part of Florida was this?
This is down in South Florida.
Yeah, it doesn't even get cold in the winter down there, so.
Well, as we record this, we're in Central Florida, and this morning it was 32 degrees.
Oh my
So
goodness. Colder than Texas. Yeah.
it's normally I'll joke. I say, oh, we had a cold spell come through. It got down to 66. I had to put a jacket on yesterday, but no, today it was cold.
Well, let's talk about boundaries because this is really important. I think sometimes the booster club, particularly when they're raising money, they're managing a lot of the process. Like you said, the concession stands, they may be doing the lines on a football field or the flags. Where's the line? Where's the boundary? And where should the booster club stay focused versus what should they leave to the coaches and the athletic directors? And what's a good overarching principle to guide that?
Well, again, in my experience, going back, I'm beating this drum till you tell me to stop. It's communication. Everybody needs to understand, what our ultimate goal is. We're trying to provide a great experience for our student athletes. We're trying to keep them safe. Yeah, we want to win some games, and normally we will, but everybody has a job. Everybody has a lane. The coach, the head coach, they're coaching. The athletic director, they're directing, if you will. And I don't mean that in a powerful way, but kind of an overseen way. The boosters, you're boosting, you're helping. You are not driving the bus. Okay. Well, you might be driving the bus. You're helping the program. You're boosting it. You're allowing us to do things that we might not be able to do on our own. So very important role, not a secondary role, but a different role. And so how can boosters do their job better? Well, obviously they need a director. They need some organization because there's a myriad of tasks that can come under that booster umbrella. They, I think, really have to sell out that, hey, this is for the kids. This is for the school. It's not about me. And whether it's boosters or athletic directors or coaches, everybody's got an ego, and being able to check that ego at the door for all parties is very important. But it just comes back to communication. At that school that I told you about, my very first school in Florida, we came up with this was our booster club's purpose. They were going to create funding for uniforms for all of our teams, varsity, JV, and middle school, because we were a K through 8 school, but we were a 6 through 8 or 6 through 12 athletic program. And so the concessions, the gate, the booster activities, booster club memberships and swag and all of that stuff, that was their number one goal. They're trying to raise enough money so that we can have our teams on a uniform rotation. And they did a wonderful job. We also allowed them, I guess allowed is not the best word, but we allowed them to choose some of those pie in the sky purchases that our coaches had given to me. I would talk to the coaches and we'd find out what would be really cool to add to your program. And each year I would give that list to our booster board, if you will. I would be there, talk about each product, and this is what it would do. This is how it would help. Sometimes they'd ask me, which one would you choose if you were doing it? And I tried not to do that because so they could feel like they were in charge of making that purchase. And that system worked out very well. As that organization grew and they did a great job of what they were doing, they ended up, I think the last 2 years that I was there, and then they continued it after I left, they did a booster scholarship for one boy and one girl. And it was $500. It wasn't, like $1 million, and it was based on coaches' recommendations. And it wasn't just MVP type kids. It was, hardworking kids. It was multi-sport kids. It was kids that had given back in some way to the school. And sometimes those were MVP kids, but that's not why they got the scholarship. It was because of the other contributions that they did. But they had that purpose. This is what we're raising money for. That's just one example of, I think, how you make it work and how you help people stay focused and in their lane.
So having been in and around this whole system for 40 years, have you seen a booster club at any given time just make a big mistake and something that you would highly recommend they avoid at your schools or others? Not limited to your, just
All
you.
right. Of course, without naming names, very successful school, very successful athletic program. They had a parent who was the driving force behind this particular team's booster efforts. Their son and daughter were participants on this team. So, of course, that's where their heart was. They had done tremendously successful job raising money, of organizing. When it was at a school I came as the AD to. I was amazed at the success, but I was also amazed at, I guess, how little the coach was involved and how much the parents seemed to be involved in what I would consider coaching/school decisions. And to make a long story short, we had a meeting. I asked a lot of questions. I was trying to get out the history because I was the new guy here. I remember saying, well, geez, I am just so impressed with what you've done, but we really need to make a couple of changes. And so there were some hurt feelings and we moved on and life continued and the team was still successful. The booster club was successful in different ways. But you need to, I guess, as the athletic director, these are your teams. You're the school's representative. You're hired by the school. The booster president or the team president is an appointed person. They're not being paid by the school. So you're the one, that's responsible if something goes south in any way. And so you have to make sure that you're comfortable with things that are going on. And it wasn't that anything was happening underhanded or anything like that at all, but it just wasn't what we would call a best practice. And so we made those changes and the coach was on board with it. Coach actually brought a couple of things to my attention and life moved on. So again, a single booster club for a school or every single sport has its own booster club. It's not right, wrong, good or bad. It's just what's the best fit for your school, your coaches, your parents, and your kids. What's going to work for you? And I've seen both systems work phenomenally well. And I've heard stories of each system having some struggles. And it comes down to the people involved.
It's interesting in the way you describe those boosters. I have a term for that. And The term that I call is a Debbie do everything. And it's usually a super successful booster club. And it has one or two people that just do all the work and it's thriving. It's going crazy. It's also on the verge of crashing and
Oh, yeah.
it gets centered on one person and they do a great job. So it's really hard to tell that person, gosh, we need you to change what you're doing because they've put in so much effort and they've done a great job. But sometimes what they haven't done is grown a team around them. And so when they move on, the booster club just falls apart or goes away because there wasn't any growth of volunteers under them or things like that. So it's kind of a dangerous situation that I always tell boosters to be aware of. Sometimes it can happen for years and be okay, but a lot of times it's a signal of a booster club that's not very healthy.
You're absolutely right. And again, it's finding those, and you know this, finding parents, because let's face it, most of them are parents, finding the parents that have the desire to help, the time to help, the inherent abilities, whether it's organizational or something, to be a positive force and not be a drain on you as an athletic director. Finding people like that is hard. And so when you have that, whether it's a Debbie or a Danny do everything, those are the people that you want. You want that enthusiasm, that passion, that skill set. But they need to understand that, okay, it's John F. Kennedy High School. It's not Debbie Smith High School. And we want you on the team. Everybody on a team has a role. This is the role I see you really being able to help us out with.
There's no I in team, right? It takes a whole team of people to run a booster club and support a program.
Oh, no, absolutely. Yeah. And I've been blessed with some great, at the schools I was at, even before we came to Florida, I've had some great booster presidents and booster parents. So I want to be very clear about that.
If you've got an athletic director who's just coming into the role and maybe a little bit new to the management or coach, to the management of the role of the boosters or interacting with the boosters, what do you recommend? How should they approach that relationship from that side?
Well, again, you got to get a lay of the land. Is there an existing booster organization? When you were interviewing and you were getting peppered with questions, one of the questions you should have asked before you said, yes, I want the job is, what's the current state of the booster organization? So you should have some idea of, oh, it's going great. Or like you said, it's on the edge of disaster. So you've got an idea. Reaching out to your coaches and your administrative staff. Another question is, who are some parents that we should be seeking out to get involved? As you have those initial parent meetings in the summer leading into the fall, make sure it's part of your speech. We're always looking for great help. If you'd like to be involved, please see me after the meeting or shoot me an email and try to reach out to those parents. A lot of times, your best booster hasn't been asked yet, and don't wait for them to come to you. You need to reach out to them and don't give them the keys to the car on that first date. You got to find out what their experience is. Talk to, let's say they're a basketball parent. Talk to that basketball coach. Hey, Mr. Smith or Mrs. Jones just talked to me about getting involved in the booster club. What's your take on them? Get some feedback. And that's not the only person you're going to ask, but certainly somebody who has a firsthand knowledge of maybe working with that parent. Do we need booster help? Absolutely. Are we going to take everybody that comes? Well, maybe not in the way that they want to be involved, but we're going to try to find them a job.
But I think that's one of the unspoken laws or rules of a booster club is that quiet recruiting that happens. And it's a necessary evil. In our booster club, I was president of a volleyball booster club. I had to know who was going to be on the team a year or two from now to know who to be recruiting into the booster club. And so the coach and I would have to have some pretty honest, frank discussions about player development so I could know, okay, target those parents or those parents, because in our program, those would be the parents that would be coming up. And it's not anything you want to formalize or put in writing, but it is a discussion you've got to have if you want to build some longevity in the program.
No, and I think that's a great idea. And you just never know. I can think of an example. This parent they weren't really a booster parent, but they were a great parent. Their daughter, talking about volleyball, was a JV player as a freshman. We had a loaded team, championship team, played varsity as a sophomore, wasn't a starter, but was pretty much penciled in to start as a junior and a senior. Junior year comes around and the kid decides doesn't want to play volleyball anymore. Okay. And the mom was just crushed because that was her identity as being that volleyball mom. But your point is spot on. recruiting those parents, the coach has got to be involved with that. And I think communicating with that booster president is a very good idea.
It's interesting. We had one year where we had recruited a player that we thought was going to continue on through, and her mom took our treasurer role. And then beginning of junior year, she decided not to play, and all of a sudden we were stuck. And the mother was kind enough to stay on for a year without having to get on the team. But you've always got those things. And it's a volunteer run nonprofit. You're always going to have some of that. You can't protect against it. Well, you've written multiple editions of the Athletic Director's Toolbox. What's one of the tools from your book that you would apply to building strong booster club partnerships?
Well, we've already talked about one of them, and that's communication. The interviews, one of the questions we ask our athletic director guests or athletic leaders, what are 3 tips you would give a brand new AD? And so the tips that we get, obviously, they'll get repeated because we've done over 700 interviews. But communication is one of the most frequently mentioned tools, and that's communicating with athletes, communicating with coaches, communicating with parents and administrators and sponsors. Another tool is organization, and you can go macro or micro on that, but certainly an athletic director that is working to build their program, their department, to be the best that it can be, they should be nurturing and cultivating a great relationship. Relationships is actually another one with that booster organization. And maybe it's, if you're at a small school, maybe it's, that 2 or 3 parents whose kids, boys and girls, they're all 3-sport athletes and they're there every night, every game to watch their kids, and they kind of become the de facto booster club. At bigger schools, you've got more resources available, but still you're going to have some of those key parents that they might not be the most vocal parent, but they've got the ability to organize, make a couple of phone calls, and begin filling some of those tasks. I still go to a lot of high school sporting events, even though I've been retired for 5 years now, but I'll see the athletic director. They're at the front gate taking tickets. Okay. That's a booster position at halftime. They're in the concession stand. And I ended up in the concession stand many times myself out of just to be there and hang out, not because I had to be there. So that's the situation that you want. You want to be there because you want to be there, not because you have to be there. People to work the score table in a volleyball game. Sometimes the coach, and we would kind of assign our coach, hey, make sure you got a head score, have that libero tracker, but running the clock, the PA announcer. There's so many different things, as we talked about at the opening, that go into having a successful home event. Your booster organization can really, really help you out in that area.
Yeah, it's a good point. We used to have one of the things that our volleyball program did is we would invite the choir kids to come sing the national anthem. And as the president, it was my job to coordinate that. It made for such a profound experience every time, different than a recorded national anthem or something. And something I was really proud of about our events. And people just have no idea that takes coordinating with the choir department, then scheduling the kids and making sure they're there on time. And it's a whole role in and of itself is getting that national anthem singer there.
Yep. Again, that's one of those things that can really add to the student experience of coming to a game. If you're talking about the whole choir, that's 8, 10, 20, 30 people that are coming to the game that are going to be buying concession items that maybe they bring their parent, have them come and watch and sing. And as whether the AD's doing it directly or the booster designee is inviting the choir to come, that's another connection between athletics and another program that can be so very valuable in, let's say, overall support.
You touched on something just a minute ago, Jake, and I just wanted to return to it because I think from the AD's perspective, it may be different, and that's sponsorships. And one of the things that we have here in Texas a lot are these multi-sport booster clubs, or rather individual sport booster clubs. So our local businesses can be asked, and we have, I think, 36 booster clubs at our school. They can be asked 36 times to support the different programs in the high school. Any suggestions or recommendations on that, or something you've seen that's worked or didn't work?
Boy, that's kind of the $64,000 question out there. Again, I was at 3 different private schools here in Florida. And the first one, was the small school. And we, the boosters, we worked and grubbed for every nickel we could get through businesses, family-owned businesses that we knew were already invested in the school. The next school that I went to, and I was there for 8 years, and it worked great for us. We thought we had it pretty good. The next school I went to was another private school down in Miami that, well, the tuition was almost $40,000 a year. So we were working in a different financial bracket. And we actually, the booster club, and just about every team had one. And this was more of a school decision as I was arriving. It wasn't like it was that AD is doing this. It was more of our head of school was doing it. Our boosters stopped being a fundraising team and turned into a fundraising organization for Spirit. And our boss just felt, and he was absolutely right, we're charging our parents $40,000 a year. We're not going to charge them $6 to come watch their kid play football or basketball. So we had no admission to our games. It was all free. There was no extra sports fee. If you're playing football or lacrosse or baseball, these heavy equipment, you have to pay another $200 sport fee or something. No, it was all covered under tuition. And part of it was we didn't want, let's say, the baseball coach going out to a local business and asking for a $5,000 donation when our development office for the entire school was asking for a $500,000 donation. And so it was a completely, probably other end of the spectrum experience. And I was there for 6 years, and it was a wonderful experience. I finished my career up in Tallahassee, up in the Panhandle, at probably one of, if not the top private school in Florida, both academically and athletically. Great school, great coaches, great kids. And we probably hit somewhere in the middle of those other two schools. There was some fundraising involved. We did have a development office that was doing similar things. But again, I would tell the coaches, and my boss backed me up on this, what do you need? What do you want? What's that really special item? And we were able to purchase, 100% of the needs. I would say 98% of the wants. I still was not a fan of camo uniforms. And those special items, we didn't really have a booster club as such, but the coaches knew, and we communicated this to our parents. If our coach says we want a new pitching machine or we need whatever it was, new wrestling mats or something, they're letting me know. And so I want my coaches to be able to coach. I want them to do the fun stuff. I don't want them doing fundraisers. And so if a coach came to me and said, Mr. Jones or Mrs. Smith wants to do a fundraiser, I would say, well, what do you need? Why are you raising money? Oh, we want to do this. And I go, well, that's probably something we can cover athletically. Sometimes we couldn't, and so we'd let them do a limited fundraising. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it absolutely does. It's a balance. And, it's in the private schools, it's a little bit different experience, but it ends up being the same thing as from the school district side. How do they keep our school district has 2 high schools, about 30 booster clubs each. So how do you keep all 60 booster clubs going to the same business in town and saying, hey, can you sponsor our kids for $1,000? And the businesses are usually good about it. We find something that works, but it's one of those tricky things when you're dealing with fundraising and organizational management that makes it hard. And you get these passionate volunteers who come in and they want to raise the money. And then they're like, well, why can't we do it? So sometimes it creates a little strife between the volunteers and the organization.
You're right. It's a delicate balance. And in that same Tallahassee community, there's a big public school just down the road from us, very successful. We played them. I had a very good rivalry with them. One of their sports programs, if you were selected as a member of their JV or varsity team, there was a $2,500 per kid fee to be a member of that team. This is a public school. And when I first heard about that, I said, that's crazy. How does the school board allow it? How do these parents not? And that's just what they did. That's how they rolled. And parents that, let's say, couldn't afford that, they were an indentured servant for that season or seasons you can imagine some of the activities that they were doing for that program to offset the cost of that sport fee.
We see that a lot on the marching band, fine arts side. The marching bands have really high fees just to go on the trips that they go on and things like that. And there's always a conflict there with the organization and every kid to participate, but then there's still a cost to participating. So you're trying to find that balance of what works.
Now, let me go and ask you a question here. I'm turning the tables on you. dance teams, some cheer programs, and certainly marching bands. They're representing the school and they play at the home games. Maybe they march in the homecoming parade, or maybe there's a local Thanksgiving parade they can march in. Most schools, they're not sending their basketball, soccer, softball teams out to these big pageants, if you will, to perform. And so why do we do that for these teams? If you want to, that's more of a club thing, like club basketball, club soccer, the travel experience. So I think I kind of know the answer, but I'm curious from a booster perspective. How do you justify spending all that money to send our kids out of the community?
I think it's an interesting question because, and might be regionally different because in Texas, a lot of our sports teams now do it. They go to, well, not in Texas, I would say even a lot of our West Coast programs, athletics, they'll do like a Hawaii football game now. So they'll
Of
do
course.
just to take the families over. And I think, honestly, I think it's where the club stuff has started to blend with the school stuff, right? The families have gotten used to the travel and the whatnot. But I think for those bands and some of those programs, that's where they have their competitions. That's where they have their tournament, if you will. And then it's just an honor to be invited to one of the bigger,
Sure.
if you're invited to the Macy's Day Parade, for example, or the Rose Parade, that's $1 million event. It takes that much money to move those 300 kids to that event and do it all. And so a lot of people on the athletic side think, oh my gosh, the boosters raise a lot of money. I'm like, you should see the other side. They have to raise a lot of money over there to travel with all those kids. But one of the things that we see now is so much of the fundraising now is done in the booster club side, which is they're nonprofit corporations and they have to benefit the whole. So a lot of people try to raise money and then send one kid out to a competition or fund one little group, and you can't do that. That's against the nonprofit rules. So we spend a lot of time educating that. And even the volunteer to play is not really allowed in the nonprofit side. So when you pay the fee to the booster club instead of to the school, you've just created a slightly different set of rules of how that money can be used and distributed and things like that. So it's one of the things we do at Booster Hub is help people understand that and where the money should go.
That all makes perfect sense. It's one of those things that, again, not every AD is going to be aware of those idiosyncratic differences. And that's why you got an organization like Booster Hub.
Yeah, that's our role, I think, right? To help under that. Well, I always like to wrap up with what sports or activities did you do in school and how did they impact your life? Obviously, I'm guessing quite a bit given your role as an athletic director and coach, but would love to hear what you did in school.
Oh, well, I mean, I went to high school and college in the decade of the 70s, graduated college in 1980. So back in that day, pretty much you did everything. I was at a big public school, but did 3 sports. Went to a small college in Oregon, played football and ran track. I still remember as a kid, I knew I was going to be an NBA basketball player, but obviously didn't pan out. But I was exposed to just some great teacher coaches growing up in junior high and high school and even on into college that were great leaders, great mentors. They worked us hard, but they made it fun. And I knew all along my father was a contractor and my 2 brothers and I, we got to work for him. I said, got to on weekends and summers. And I just hated every minute of it, just hated it. And so I knew I didn't want to work for a living. And so I went to college so I could keep playing football and keep doing sports. And as I'm getting ready to graduate, I go, oh, geez, you can get paid to coach? And well, you got to teach too. I said, well, I could do that. I could be a PE teacher. And so just getting on that path. And as you mentioned earlier, 41 years as a teacher, a coach, and an AD, I had a great time. I tell the story. My dad told me years and years ago, I was probably in junior high and probably on a job site complaining about what I was doing. And he said, Jake, the secret to happiness is finding something that you love to do and convincing somebody else to pay you to do that. And he had that in his job. He loved his job. He loved everything about it. I found that in teaching and coaching. And so it's been a great run. I'm still involved, obviously, with the podcast, and I do consulting work for schools and speaking engagements. So I'm still got a hand in the game a little bit and really have enjoyed the opportunity to help other ADs, that next generation, if you will, enjoy the job as much as I did.
Love that story. Love getting paid to do something you love to do. That's success, right? I think that's the definition of success. Well, Jake, thanks for joining us. Tell me where listeners can connect with you and find some of your resources, and I'll also drop them in the notes in the podcast. But what's the best way to reach out to you and find your resources?
Well, I guess the podcast, it's called The Educational AD Podcast. It's on Spotify, it's on Apple, all the podcast carriers. We're one of the very few AD-related podcasts that puts out new content every single day, 5 days a week. The videos of our podcasts are also up on our YouTube channel, so you can just type in Educational AD Podcast. You can reach me. My email is jakestouchdown at gmail.com. I'm also Jake's Touchdown on X. I'm on most social media platforms except TikTok. I haven't made that jump yet, but we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. Also, my consulting group, Victory Educational Athletics. You can find that on the World Wide Web. We help with career search. We help with career education, anything in the head coach, athletic director world. Happy to help out. And I guess finally, our books, the Athletic Director's Toolbox series, they're available on Amazon. If you're a brand new athletic director, this is your first year and you're listening to this podcast, shoot me an email and I'll send you a free copy of one of our books because I know you're going to love it so much. You're going to go back and you're going to buy one or two of the other series.
Love that. Well, Jake, thank you for what you do. Thank you for giving back to all the students that you've helped and coaches and athletic directors you've helped over the years. You can't put a price on that and what it's been worth and how it's impacted change in people's lives.
Well, thanks to you. Thank you for those kind words. Thanks to you for joining our podcast group as a partner with Booster Hub. Really love the platform. And thanks for all you do to help athletic directors work better with their booster organizations.
Well, I'm sure we'll be hearing from you again soon in the near future.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot. You have a great day.
You too.
The Boosted Volunteer is brought to you by Booster Hub. To find out more about Booster Hub and how our app can help you improve communications, increase engagement, raise more money, and manage your booster club responsibly, visit www.boosterhub.com. And then make sure to search for Booster Club Podcast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Booster Hub, thanks for listening.